Hello Booktube, I'm Jonathan and welcome to Words in Time. Today we're going to be giving you some book recommendations, but in order to give you some fantasy recommendations, I'm taking care of the sci-fi. I needed to recruit Jolien from Jolien's Reads. Jolien, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. I'm super excited to give some fantasy recommendations.
Awesome. So here's the premise for today's video. We're going to be giving you 5 recommendations each. I read a lot of sci-fi. Jolien reads a lot of fantasy. She has one of the best fantasy booktube channels, so definitely go check it out. And each recommendation is going to be for a specific subgenre or category. So there should be a recommendation here that should suit everyone. I think there'll be a book that'll interest you. So I'll kick us off. My first subgenre is time travel. And for time travel, I picked Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. So I like this because it's an interesting take on time travel. It's not the very familiar, let's go back and back again and back again until we fix whatever we need to fix. We actually follow a character who is in World War II, and this is loosely based on some experiences of Kurt Vonnegut himself, where he comes unstuck in time. So the lack of control he has over where he is in time kind of helps us explore some of the themes of free will and post-traumatic stress. And while it deals with some very heavy themes, this is a very funny book. So if you're looking for some interesting sci-fi concepts, a very personal story, also with a bit of dark humor, I think Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut is definitely worth a read.
It sounds very interesting, especially because I love World War historical fiction. And it seems like a short book. So is it good if you're new to sci-fi?
Yes, I think Kurt Vonnegut is quite good for getting into sci-fi. He's actually the first sci-fi author that I fell in love with. And as you can see, I think it's only around 250 pages or something. So yeah, definitely one to check out if you're newer to sci-fi.
Great track. Well, I'm going to start with a quest trope, which is just perfect for fantasy. But The Ninth Reign by Jen Williams is a little bit different. We're basically following 3 main characters. One is Vintage, and she is an Indiana Jones type of character. She's roaming the world, and she's trying to figure out what these 8 reigns that happened in the past were exactly. We know that these were wars, but these happened so long ago that they don't really know who the invaders were, what they wanted, are they coming back, and maybe a 9th reign will happen. So all of this and more we do discover in this book. I think that this is perfect if you like world building, and towards the end, I felt that there were maybe some sci-fi elements. So especially if you like sci-fi and you want to mix it with some fantasy, I think this one is perfect.
Awesome. I like that kind of combination. Indiana Jones, sci-fi, quests, a little bit of a video game feel maybe.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, my second category is hard sci-fi. And for this one, I think I picked a kind of accessible way to get into hard sci-fi. It's one with a bit of hype, but I think it deserves the hype. And that is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So in Project Hail Mary, we have a character that wakes up, they're on some kind of space mission, but they have a form of amnesia, and they have to figure out how did they get there, why are they on this mission, and solve all the things that inevitably go wrong using maths, science, physics. Guys, it makes science cool. And while it does get really into some scientific details, it is quite heavy on the science, I really think it makes it accessible with a fast-paced storyline and some really, really cool characters. I really love sci-fi. I love this book. Dom over at Dominish Books, he pretty much only reads fantasy. He absolutely loved this book. And my dad, shout out to my dad, doesn't read a lot of fantasy or sci-fi either. He also loved Project Hail Mary. So hard science, but accessible.
That sounds perfect. I actually have an Andy Weir book on my shelves. I don't know which one. I think it's the first one that he's written. Like The
Martian was first. Everyone loved that one. Artemis was second. Mixed response to that one. Project Hail Mary, awesome.
Okay, so if I love Artemis, the first one, then I need to go and just skip Artemis.
I haven't read it, so I wouldn't say necessarily, but maybe prioritize the other 2.
That's good to know. Well, the next one that I have is a revenge plot, which is one of my favorite subgenres/categories in fantasy. And I went with 12 Kings by Bradley P. Bolio, which is the first book in a 6-book-long series. Now, in this one, we meet Shada, who is a pit fighter in the desert city of Sharakai. And when she was young, her mother was actually murdered by 12 immortal kings. Now, Shada doesn't really know why, what happened, what games her mother was playing, but she wants to find out and along the way take revenge on these 12 immortal games. Now, I think this is perfect if you also really like interference of the gods, because the immortality was actually given by gods. And I love that. When you have gods in your story, when they play a vital role, that's what you get here.
Awesome. I like that. This is one I haven't heard of, but I do like a revenge plot, Count of Monte Cristo. Don't know how healthy that is. We'll dig into that later. But love that trope, and the influence of the gods. That sounds pretty cool.
It's one that I heavily recommend.
Ooh, double recommendation from Jolien there. Okay, my third category, not so much a subgenre. I'm calling this one beautifully written sci-fi, because sci-fi, and not undeservedly so, is not usually known for its prose. It usually focuses on the ideas, the concepts, the world building. But I think Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury is absolutely one of the most beautifully written sci-fi books I've read. Classic dystopian sci-fi alongside 1984, Brave New World, We. And while 1984 maybe has the story that I connected with the most, this is definitely the most beautifully written. So you may have heard of this one before, but it deals with censorship and things that shape people and culture. And, you know, as booktubers, the idea of burning books is very upsetting to us. This is a traumatizing book, but it's wonderfully written, and another short one that I think you should pick up and get through pretty quickly.
Well, I'm actually reading a couple of classics this year, and I love 1984. It's one that I read when I was still a teenager, so I need to have something similar. This one will make the shortlist, definitely.
Awesome. I think you'll like it.
Well, next up, I could not recommend a grim dark story, so I went with Blood Song by Anthony Ryan. This is actually one of my favorite books of all time, and it's basically coming of age meets grimdark. Here you meet Valen, and you meet him when he's just 6 years old, and his father basically drops him off at the gate of the Sixth Order, which is like the military section of the Fate. Now, Valen goes in this training school, and this is a harsh environment to grow up. Literally, every year, boys die. So you see him growing up, you become attached to Valen, and when he's a grown-up, he eventually realizes what the true evil of this world is. So if you like more personalized story, if you want to feel attached to a character, I think that this one is perfect. And it also has quite some military scenes as well.
Very cool. I haven't read a lot of sci-fi, but fantasy, but I'm interested in the grimdark genre. If you guys like grimdark or interested in it, definitely watch Jolien's video on what is grimdark. It's one of the best videos that I've watched recently on BookTube. And yeah, that combined with the military, that might tie into something that I'm going to recommend in a minute or two. So I like that one. My fourth recommendation is under the subgenre of First Contact. So classic sci-fi trope. What's a sci-fi book without aliens? Well, I picked Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So a little bit longer than some of the other recommendations, but definitely worth it. We have humans that are far in the future looking for a planet to colonize. And after a certain colonization attempt goes wrong, a planet with spiders on it ends up having super intelligent spiders on it. So we follow two different storylines, the humans and the spiders. And the spider society, we get to see evolve over time, and it's kind of overlaid between things that we would recognize as human, but other things that are also distinctly spider-esque, alien-esque. So I really love the culture there, the science, and then the combination of the two. And this is one where I liked it for the first 2/3, and I absolutely love the final third. This is a book that really sticks the ending. So if you guys aren't too afraid of spiders, definitely check out Children of Time.
Ooh, that one sounds interesting. I must say, even though I haven't read a lot of sci-fi, I want to get into it more, but I've actually never read one with aliens, which is kind of strange.
Wow.
But this one,
well, this is a good place to start. This will set a high alien bar for you.
Perfect. Well, next up, I wanted to recommend a fantasy that is non-Western inspired, because almost all fantasies are set in medieval England or something like that, but this one is completely different. And that is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. So Ken Liu, if you're a sci-fi fan, you might recognize his name because he has translated quite a bit of sci-fi books as well. But this one is heavily inspired by Chinese history. And so much so that I would say don't look up Chinese history because you might get spoiled for some of the events in it. We follow multiple characters in the Empire on the brink of rebellion. Now, I wanted to recommend this one because not only is, of course, the plot heavily influenced by Asian history, but the writing style is also quite different. And I have been told that this is set or is told more in a traditional Chinese way of storytelling. So if you want something completely different, I think that this one is a great one.
Awesome. I like the originality of this setting. I like that you said don't read the history.
Yeah, I did so, and I knew what was going to happen in this book, so it's very similar.
That was my friend Matt. He says, I don't watch the news anymore. I just wait till the new season of The Newsroom on HBO. That's like a 10-year-old joke. So I liked it. I remembered Matt's joke from like 10 years ago. Yes, Ken Liu translated 2 of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy books. And has some great short stories. So good for sci-fi and fantasy fans. Okay, on to my fifth and final recommendation. This one tying into one of Jolene's. It is military sci-fi. And for that, I have picked The Forever War by Joe Haldeman. So there are a lot that I could have gone with. Ender's Game is a favorite of mine that you could also say is within that category. But the thing about The Forever War is Joe Haldeman actually fought in the Vietnam War. So if you really like military sci-fi, you really want to get into the military aspects, I don't think anybody writes it better than Joe Haldeman. I think it's a really realistic look. It's not necessarily a glorified look. It shows some of the real harsh realities of it. But I think there's some hopeful moments. I really appreciated some of the character moments. There's some pretty heavy sci-fi concepts in there that I really enjoyed as well. So if you like military sci-fi or intrigued for it, I think The Forever War sets the bar.
This is actually one that I've never heard of before. You did say that it has some hard sci-fi elements. Does that make it difficult for a beginner of sci-fi to get into it? Or is it fine to just jump into it straight away?
I would say you could jump into it. It's not too hard, and it kind of explains some of the concepts. So for example, one of the things is time dilation. So we have humans. It's kind of funny. It was written in the 70s. It was set in the future of the 1990s. Perhaps should have picked a date a little bit further into the future. But they're at war with aliens, and as spaceships travel closer towards the speed of light, those people experience time dilation. So when they return to Earth, a lot of time has passed on Earth. So concepts like that I think are kind of interesting sci-fi concepts, but they're explained in the book. So I think someone new to the genre could pick it up.
That's good to know. Well, for my final recommendation, I went with a more traditional fantasy with multiple magic systems. And of course, I had to mention Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb.
Nice.
This is the first book in the realm of the Elderlings. I love this series. And in this first one, we meet Fitz, who is a royal bastard. We meet him when he's just 6 years old. He's living in the keep. He doesn't really have a place. Nobody really wants him there. But then all of a sudden, the royal family decides that he can be their secret assassin. Now, in this book or in this world, you have multiple magic systems, and one of them is the wit. If you have the wit, that means that you can talk to animals and form a bond with one special animal. So if you love animal companions, I think that this is the perfect series for you. But do keep your tissues ready because Robin Hobb is not afraid to make you cry.
I feel like I need to go get my dog and just give her a little hug now.
You need to.
You've just got me scared. So yeah, that is one I have heard of. Realm of the Elderling seems to have some very passionate fans within the fan base. Jolene's one of them, it would seem.
Definitely, yeah. It's worth the hype.
Worth the hype. How many books in this series? Like
16.
16?
So it's definitely a commitment, but they are in shorter sub-series. So this one is the first one in the Farseer trilogy. So you don't have to read all 16 at once.
Nice. So you can break your crying into chunks. Like if I feel like having a crying month, I'll pick up another Robin Hobb trilogy.
Exactly.
All right, awesome. Well, those are our 5 sci-fi and 5 fantasy recommendations. Let us know in the comments if you enjoyed any of those books, or if any of them sounded interesting. Let us know if you're going to be picking them up. Leave a comment on my channel, and go subscribe to Jolien and let her leave a comment on her channel as well. Thank her for the recommendations.
Love that. Well, thanks for having me, Jonathan. My sci-fi TBR has increased a little bit after this conversation. I had a lot of fun. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the great recommendations. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe. You can find more sci-fi content over here.